next up, we have our panel, which is all about the game business post-vaccine and looking at how we slowly return to normality. I've got Kai here, one of my judges and friends. It's good to see you again, Kai.
Hey, Sophia. Good to see you.
You too. How are you doing?
Good. Fantastic. I'm still at home.
Yes, yeah, same here. I mean, you can't see because of the virtual background, but sadly the curtains have to be closed, otherwise it messes with my virtual background. So I'll look forward to seeing the sun at lunchtime. And I can see we've got all of the rest of the panel here. So hi to everyone. I won't do any introductions just yet because we're waiting for two of the panelists to come, Xavier and Petri, but also I will let Kai do all the introductions with all of you all, but I just wanted to say hello to everyone.
Hi.
It's great to have you here.
Hello.
Hi Renee, hi Kirstin, hi George.
Hello.
I'm also not going to do any introduction because everybody here is grown up, so they can do that themselves. Yeah. I'll give you time in a minute.
So just to give you an update, we've got Petri's just joining us. Xavier, we're trying to locate, but I think in the best interests, it might be good once we've got Petri in, we will let you guys get started, do some introductions, get the conversation flowing, and then we can bring Xavier in when they get here.
Yes, he can ride our wave that we start then. That's totally cool.
Exactly. So we'll give it a moment and then we'll get going. But yeah, how is everyone else? Everyone safe, well, feeling comfortable, relaxed?
Very good. Yes, I managed to go to a pub, which sounds pretty mundane, but for the last about 4 months, we've had our civil liberties severely curtailed. So the opportunity to go and have some bevies, I think is the technical term. It's been very nice. Thank you very much.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I'm looking forward at some point after this show to being able to go into town and walk around. That'll be a novelty.
Exactly, that'll be marvelous. Exactly. Are you going to celebrate another PGC Digital Well Done? I'm sure.
Yeah, it's probably on my own, sitting outside Costa with a hot chocolate. But that sounds nice at the moment.
Exactly, with a hot chocolate and the laptop open, so you can talk to the rest of the team over another.
Yes.
Cool. Right. Fantastic.
Yeah. Right. Well, I think Petri's going to be joining, but rather than you guys listen to my personal inane chit chat, I think I'll let Kai take over, let you guys get started, and we'll throw them in when they get here. So I'll drift off into the background, but before that, I just want to remind everyone, use the chat and use the Q&A to throw your questions in, because Kai, I'm sure you can, or myself can go through the questions at the end. And for the first time, we've got subtitles, so if subtitles are useful to you, you can use them. You can even go on to like transcript mode where it'll tell you who said specific things, which is useful for panels specifically.
Fancy. Thank you so much, Sophia, for giving us some space. That's awesome.
No worries. And just to say, we've had an update. Petri's just struggling to get in. He is here, so I'll add them in when they get here. Fantastic.
All right, let's roll. Hi everyone, welcome to our little round here. Thank you first of all to Bucket Gamer to give us this forum, really appreciate it. Hope we can shed some light on some interesting aspects. We have a very diverse panel today. I'll start with some really quick introduction on my end. Hi, my name is Kai. I'm currently serving as the CEO of Paladin Studios. We are a small, mid-sized developer, independent in the Netherlands. I always call us a bootstrapped startup since 15 years because that's what we are. Just released a really cool game together with Septolab on Apple Arcade called Cut the Rope Remastered. Check it out. And that's it for my public service announcement. And I'd like each of the panelists to briefly introduce themselves. I reminded you guys to be brief because we want to get into the discussion. So why don't we start with last names in alphabetical order. Kirstin, you first. Oh, you're muted.
I'm still muted. I was kind of hoping you'd go with like ladies first and then maybe Renee first. But
no, we're a very diverse crowd here.
Okay, so I'm Kirstin. I am a BizDev through and through, essentially. And for the past year and a half, just about, I've been training people how to do BizDev. So I run a training and coaching and teaching enterprise hobby stuff, and that's been very fun. I also do some stuff with incubators and accelerators on the side because indies tend to need help the most, and that keeps me busy. So that's me.
Cool. Thank you, Kirstin. That's certainly, you know what you're talking about in that area, and that's a really cool idea for actually a service. So I love it. Renee, you're next.
I was going to say, next up would be me. Hi, my name is Renee Gittens. I am the Executive Director of the International Game Developers Association, which is a nonprofit professional association whose mission is to support and empower game developers around the world in achieving fulfilling and sustainable careers. And of course, a big part of that is helping developers through this pandemic and help them readjust to the world post that. I also run my own indie studio on the side, so I get the development side as well.
Cool, fantastic. Very happy to have you. I know it's super early for you, so
very early.
looking fantastic. Thank you for being with us. George, last but certainly not least.
Thank you very much. So I'm George Osborne. I'm the head of communications for Ukie. Ukie is the video games industry trade body for the UK. We represent over 500 businesses across the UK games ecosystem, and we try and support businesses basically from everything from education, so getting people into the industry and helping schools and universities establish what can be done in terms of games, to helping businesses start up to get access to finance and great business advice, and then all the way up to the very top level of managing press relations with the national media and lobbying government to try and make sure that we can get some lovely things like continuing tax breaks and funding for companies here to help the ecosystem grow. So we do a whole lot, I guess, and it keeps us very busy.
Fantastic. I have to say, all three of you guys nailed your pitches. Fantastic. Very good. I'm very happy to have you. So let's dive in. This is actually kind of like a continuation of a panel that we did last time around, which had a similar topic. So I'm very, very pleased that we can actually dig a little bit deeper and also look a bit more forward. The last time we looked at, what did this whole pandemic do to us, and what are we learning? And this time we want to look a little bit out, maybe beyond dealing with the pandemic on a global and individual level. So just to set the stage, everybody knows, I think by now, that in early spring last year, hand sanitizer became a very hot commodity. And we've been hit with a global pandemic that was unlike anything we've seen in the last 100 years. I can't remember that far back, where I am really old, but certainly something very serious. It's affected everybody, also our industry, all of us individually. There's been positive effects, certainly, because people stay at home, they play a lot of games. That's cool. And there's, there certainly have been challenges as well. For us on our end, we've been working remotely now in month 14, and that is something that didn't happen before. So just to start it off, I wanted to ask you guys again, what the most important learning is that you took from the last 12 months, as a team or individually. If you can just briefly touch on that, and then we'll see if we dig into one of these a little bit deeper. But what did you learn from everything that happened, and what would you like to share in terms of those learnings? George, I'll go with you first.
Yes, well, exactly. I thought that was the fair thing to do, considering I managed to last time. It's a really good question, because I think everyone has learned so much, because we've been forced to, right? I think there's nothing like a crisis to bring out the ingenuity in everyone, partly because we need to find our way through, but also because of the general sense of potential sort of slight panic and madness when you realize all of your best laid plans have suddenly gone out the window. I think the biggest thing that we've really learned has been about how resilient the industry has been overall. One of the things for us is that we work with a lot of the other creative industries as well. So we've worked with things like film and television. We're aware of what's going on in terms of theatre and music. And in terms of at a government level, we saw those organisations and those industries immediately need support because of the nature of their business. They needed to go in and get funding and all kinds of emergency support to be able to keep themselves going, because the way they operated just simply wasn't going to be able to survive something like this. Whereas with games businesses, we surveyed businesses about 3 or 4 months into the pandemic, and we reported about 80% productivity in terms of the industry, and a quarter of the companies in our membership who responded said they were continuing to hire. And so I think the resilience of the industry was something that really stood out to us. And it's been really important for us in terms of telling the story of why government should back games industry and back games industry jobs, because these are high value jobs that can be created across the country and are very good at riding out challenges. But while we learned about that resilience, we also learned those little spaces where companies definitely need some sort of normality to return. It's hard to meet your deadlines, especially if you're a really big company, if you don't have people coming together at those sort of key challenging moments. Small indie developers were reporting difficulty getting access to finance because it's harder to have those meetings face to face with publishers and investors because you can't have those meetings face to face. So I think what we learned was a lot about the character of the industry, but also about those little things where, as we come into this post-vaccine world, we've learned about the things that we really need to try and restore as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. One of the aspects is, also for us was last year, like getting information, right? Not just what's actually happening in the world, because there's plenty of news available for that, but where can you find help, right? Renee, I know that IGDA also tries to be a source of information and help there. And maybe you can just briefly touch on that and maybe point people to a URL. A very short one that they can write down, or just tell us a little bit about how your organization likes to support, similar to George.
Yeah, certainly. Like George said, we certainly have seen a lot of resilience from the games industry. And I think that our industry is uniquely positioned for using the technology that we're familiar with to overcome challenges. We've seen lots of really great innovations, from using Unity and 3D spaces to have actual conferences where you're running around as an avatar and still networking with people, to just really creative use of various whiteboarding apps and other types of communication. Something that I think really touched me was seeing that a lot of teams were making use of communication tools in ways that are more passive. So for example, they would have a Discord server up and a bunch of them would sit in the same room and not necessarily talk, but be able to unmute and comment on something, just as if they were in an open office space, which the game industry is so used to. Mm-hmm. Of course, there are many technical challenges in addition to communication challenges, as well as, of course, mental health. I have our survey up here. So according to our survey, we saw that almost 50% of developers were dealing with dependence in their households, where they either had children or older parents that they needed to take care of while they were working from home, which obviously is a big challenge to overcome. And also the mental health struggles were significant. I mean, as much as we'd all love to continue developing games, being in a pandemic, being in a recession is quite stressful, and that affects our mental health and our ability to focus. So what the IGDA did is, at the start of the pandemic in April of last year, actually an entire year ago, we hosted our own emergency conference that we were calling the Game Development Crisis Conference. And it was our intention to bring in experts and provide resources and information about how to overcome all these challenges. So we had Take This provide information about self-care and mental health. We had some technical experts talk about removing your large studios to remote working and how to overcome different issues with VPNing into a server and increasing your bandwidth in order to manage that, and many, many more. So if you're interested in those resources, because of course it takes like 10 hours to go over everything in there, you can actually find them at igda.org. Under our resources tab, there's a COVID-19 page, and it has all of the talks from that wonderful conference, as well as additional resources that we brought together.
Cool, fantastic. Thank you so much. Yeah, and that's these are really great things, and that's why I also am so grateful that we actually have this opportunity to talk about this here, and we get a forum and hopefully provide input and tips to a lot of people out there that struggle with very similar things, right? Kirstin, what's you're a lone fighter mostly, being out there for your clients. What changed for you? I mean, our main networking tool in the past have been events, right? Like Pocket Gamer Connect. And the physical space obviously fell away. Last round we talked, we said, this might be a real issue for somebody that's just starting in the industry. How are you going to meet people, right? You can go to digital conferences, and they're a great tool and awesome to get knowledge and make connections, but it's different, right? If you run into something at a breakfast buffet over a shared love of blueberry muffins, obviously. What have you seen in terms of struggle with in that area, and what's your own experience?
So that's like 3 questions, basically.
All right, just compress it.
I'll break it down. So in terms of the people I work with, I see it, obviously there's like huge downsides to not having physical events, to not just being able to network, because those chance encounters are often what make a conference, right? We all know that. And you don't really have that. I do have some clients that really did just start out last year. And that's a challenge, right? If you're an art outsourcing studio and you're starting in 2020, it's tough, right? But what I've always tried to kind of make people understand is that yes, it's harder, but you can actually make progress right now on learning how to do these conferences, on improving your pitch, on just having those like stages of your pipeline, or even if it's just higher level BD stuff and not necessarily sales, you can work on all of that now. And it's much lower cost right now, right? Normally going to a Pocket Gamer, for me, I live in Germany, so it's a train ride there or a flight there, then it's a couple of days of hotel. It takes like a week of my time, plus some time to prep before and in advance. It's for many, especially for smaller companies, it's a significant investment. And it's not so much right now. So one company I work with is from a country it's essentially an emerging market, right? They don't have, for them attending a conference is like several salaries of somebody. And for them to have this opportunity to do everything digitally is actually really good. Still tough. And then of course, the struggle with digital conferences I find is that many matchmaking systems are not necessarily super difficult to use, but people are very bad at setting the right filters, at tagging all the right things. If try putting in publisher looking for developments in the PGC matchmaking, and it's abysmal. There's like more people that got it wrong than people that got it right. So I actually found it a really important time to help spread this knowledge of like, how do you actually do this? How do we do this better? How can you prepare for the phase after the conference, right? Whatever that will look like. And to really use this time. So that's in terms of what have I seen people do. I also have personal friends that are not necessarily, they don't have the best BD skills, but they're really good at being at conferences and drinking with developers and then selling their analytics that way. And they are like, they've just taken jobs again, right? They're leaving at kind of like low level, and they say, look, these digital conferences don't work for us. We're waiting. And the problem I think with that is that we don't know how long we're going to be waiting. And not every country is as fast as the UK.
Yeah, true.
Can I add what my personal experience has been? Because I've been talking for some time.
Sure, you're here.
So for me on a personal level, my day-to-day work didn't change that much, except for the conferences, right? I'm at home, I'm doing everything remotely. But I do have 2 children that they grow up in 2 households. So when they're here, I get to homeschool elementary kids while also working, which is a feat. I'm not gonna lie, it's the hardest thing I've ever done. It's very difficult to combine all of this while also staying sane and positive, and like making yourself take every little step that needs to happen, even though you don't necessarily always feel like it, and also taking the space to take a break when that's necessary. I've had a burnout a couple of years ago, and I've really only integrated what I learned there this past year, because it just became so necessary. And it is a bit lonely as somebody who runs a company alone and has clients and of course connections and stuff. I don't have regular exchange with other people, so it can feel very isolating. And I've actually had to make it a habit to reach out to people on a certain cadence so that I get some like social energy in, because I am a BD. I need this. This is like the part I love the most about the job, and you need to adapt. It's not easy.
Yeah, no, certainly. I think relearning to adapt to a completely new situation is something that all of us had to do, and a lot of people are doing, right? So I'm wondering, Kirstin, you mentioned that that the work-life balance, not necessarily working less, but working different, and slotting in your life different into your work. That's something I think a lot of us experienced, right? Like, I save about 4 hours every day in commute. I know I will never do that again, commute, because it's a waste, right? So I wanted to ask you guys, like, as an industry, if you look at it at the studio level or an industry level, do you think that everything is going to be like it was before? Or do you really think like all the things that changed and all the experiences that we had over the last 12 months will have a lasting impact, right? Will more people work at home, for instance, or remotely than before? Once we all have our shot and we're all going back. So I'm interested what you guys think, especially George and Renee, when you've been in touch with a lot of different and a very diverse group of people in the industry and companies. Renee, what do you think? Are we just going back to normal and that's it, or will things actually have a lasting impact and change?
We are entering a new normal, I think. I do not think that. I mean, I've seen that not all game development studios are returning to required in-person work. Some studios, of course, prefer that being part of their creative pipeline, but many others have decided to let their employees work remotely if they desire, or some of them have transferred to complete remote work, complete virtual work, and decided to save money on their office spaces and to allow for more flexibility in hiring, since they have found that remote work is efficient enough for them, that it works well enough for them. And I think that's what we're going to see be the new trend. I mean, of course, we've seen that in large tech companies as well. And I think it is more of a challenge when it comes to game development, because there's a lot more nuance to what we're working on. Capturing fun is not quite the same as capturing product specifications for basically anything else. But I think that a lot of studios have been able to overcome that difficulty and are now looking at the future through a new lens, understanding that remote work is another tool in their toolbox. When it comes to conferences, I think we're going to be seeing more of a mix. We're going to see more hybrid conferences, and we're going to see some conferences that will always exist as virtual from here on out. But I do think that there is also a huge desire to meet each other in person again. As someone who usually attends 4, 5, 10 conferences a year, I think that we're sort of raring to see our friends, to connect again, and to have those in-person connections that to an extent help drive some of us and let us feel refreshed, both in terms of energy and creativity.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned that, events, and I think it's it's a very small industry still, even if it has grown exponentially since the ancients like me started like 30 years ago. But what I knew before subconsciously, but realize more and more, it's actual friendships and people that you have an urge to communicate with and exchange opinions, not so much the business actually as a primary driver that makes me go to these conferences, right? And I'm looking forward to attending maybe smaller events, right? Pocket Gamer is not a huge one for me. Yes, there's 1,000 people there, or now we have even more online. But I'm not so much looking forward to a Gamescom. It's like 200,000 people, but like the slightly smaller events. But Gamescom is cool because it's in my backyard here in Germany. But yeah, George, anything that's different there in terms of the UK industry to just doing what you did before, or lasting impacts that you can see?
Oh, it is a really interesting question. I know for us as an organization, we're having to think about this really carefully because we're slightly different to your usual games business, because for the most part, we are writing documents, we're writing policy papers, we're putting out press releases on behalf of the industry. We're not doing development work ourselves. So for us, we mostly just moved our laptops out of the office and kind of carried on. But in terms of our office space, one of the things that every Ukie member has access to is access to our office in normal times. We have meeting rooms that they can book. We have a recording studio that's available for them. There's hot desking space, all of these kinds of things. And I think what we're finding at the moment, as we're starting to do this sort of preliminary research, is we're finding a lot more businesses who are doing exactly what Renee's saying, which is thinking about that full-term office space and whether or not they either need as much of it or any of it at all, but then looking towards where they can fill the gaps, coming into a space like ours potentially at some point down the line to host those meetings where you need ideas bouncing off. Because yes, we might not be doing games development, but we've seen the same thing ourselves when trying to have a creative meeting. It's so much easier when you're sitting opposite people and you've got whiteboards up and you're scribbling ideas there than it is over video screens, where you can feel your focus kind of going after 45 minutes and you start glancing at your phone and off it goes. So the way I kind of see it coming towards is, I think it's about how companies are going to preserve the best of the last year while going back to the best of what there was before. So, it's talking about making sure that we maintain that greater flexibility in terms of the way we work, because if we have that, we can have a more diverse industry. It's much more inclusive, especially towards things like parents and carers who can actually start structuring their days around what works there.
Yes.
You can get that better balance. No one's going to kick off if you leave early one day to go and do some five-a-side football, because people recognize that during the pandemic hell year, you were trusted to do your work and you did it. So there's greater trust there. But I think ultimately as well, it just allows different businesses and different business models to flourish. One of the greatest parts of the games industry, and also sometimes its greatest challenge, is the fact that the industry has so many different company types succeeding so successfully. I think the shift towards this new normal may actually be beneficial for us as a sector, because those companies that maybe do need to go back to the office and do need to work that way, they'll find people who are really attracted to that way of working, while other companies will be able to offer that more flexible set of benefits to actually be able to go and flourish in that sense. So I think it really is about making sure that when we go back, we take on board the best stuff that we've learned in the past year, but just preserve some of those things that we have all missed.
Yeah, and I think that's a great notion, and that's what we've been trying to operate on from the very beginning as well. Like, what's the positive thing that we can take out of it, right? And diversity, inclusiveness, being able to now, in the situation where we're all remote, work with people from India and Chile in our case, like that would have been impossible before. So I wonder though, that flexibility and being able to pivot on your heels, is that something that actually is an advantage for like smaller indies, because that's how they usually work at the beginning, right, Kirstin? They get together, doesn't matter where they are and where they sit. Did they struggle less from your point of view, or did it not really make a difference?
Good question. So I think in theory, indies are more flexible, but in practice, they don't usually pivot that much. What I think we all tend to see is we've been working on this game for like the missed bus fallacy, right? We've been working on it for this long, so now you got to see it through, even though it's going to be tears and blood. But I actually know some teams that have always been working fully remote, or mostly actually. I think they have an office for like 6 people, but they're like 50 plus people all around the globe. And they've had a massive advantage because they've just been doing it for really long. What I'm hearing from some, so I do some work with recent graduates, and they struggle, especially the creative folk. I don't know if this has resolved now. I think it must have, that it's hard to have proper creative processes, that they're lacking ideas. And I think that's a question of input to get output. So if you don't have as many things coming at you that you can make something of, then I think you're diminishing that ability. So finding ways around that, I think, is important. I actually would like to get back to the question on what will maybe change in the new normal, whatever the new normal is. And I think there's been 3 really, really good things that we can take from this. There's a bigger focus on people's needs, like the employee, what do people need to feel valued, seen, have a good work-life balance, be happy people, collaborate with each other. There's a much, much, much bigger focus on that now, I find. And I hope that'll stay because it's very, very healthy, and I love seeing it. Then environmental impact. So I think in terms of conferences, we've all been kind of a bit uneasy about the way too much flying that comes as a result of that, right? I mean, I have spent the past few years flying like around 100,000 miles, and that's just like, I'm avoiding plastic. I'm driving really slow when I drive. I take trains and stuff, but still, it's like
you're one of these slow drivers.
Right? Yes. It's stupid. It's really stupid. So for me, I think I know what I'm gonna do, and I've heard a lot of people say the same, is to really reduce conferences, like physical conferences, because there will be hybrid conferences, because there will be events that are purely digital, and because we're now more aware of how annoying it really was to be always on the go. So traveling less, traveling more consciously, maybe taking the train more. I think that would and then the third part is being flexible with working times, with what works with people, with tools, trying things, deciding they're not right, trying the next thing, iterating on this. And I think that will all be things that we will take out of this. To what degree, I'm not sure, but
yeah, these are really interesting points, and I think it's what we're very adamant about is that we don't drop the conversations around these things once we all have a vaccine, and we could go back to the office. And the idea of everything you do on a personal level does have an impact somewhere, right? I mean, 100,000 miles a year is a lot. I'm guilty as charged for a lot more, and I'm sure Renee has a book to fill there as well, and George. But I do want to be more conscious about this, and that can be the lasting impact from this, right? Now I wonder if the conversations around these things are going to get less once we're in a more operational mode on a global scale or not, and what role do you guys see for on each of your levels, right? Kirstin, you have an impact with your clients, right? To continue these conversations and instigate them, and Renee and George, you guys too. Is that something that you guys actively think about already? Is this something that changes your roadmap or your mission? Curious to see what you guys think there.
So this one, I think it's quite good for us to jump in on now, because a month ago we made the commitment as Ukie as an organization to be carbon neutral by 2022.
Awesome.
We've just signed up we've signed up as the first associate partner for the UN's Playing for the Planet initiative. And as part of that, we launched, with the help of some of our members, a green games guide. And it's got advice in there specifically about how you can follow a 5-step process to get your business to the point where it's carbon neutral. So because we were exploring exactly the same thing, and I think with the UK, COP26, it's meant to be taking place in Glasgow in November this year. So it's the major UN sort of environmental conference. And so in the country at the moment, COVID is obviously number one topic of conversation, but COP and the environmental conversation is very much going on in the background. And, you know, what we realized, especially when talking to a few people about it towards the end of last year, is the games businesses didn't have much practical advice about how to go about actually reducing that footprint. And in the case of games companies, they didn't necessarily know where the damage was being done. You know, people were talking about things like plastic boxes for, you know, PC and console games, but with physical sales on the decline, it's actually the footprints of servers. You know, it's things like people not realizing that having thousands of emails in your inbox actually has quite a significant environmental footprint and a negative impact. So what we're trying to do with this is, as well as committing to it ourselves, we're going to be running events throughout the summer and especially on towards COP26, where we're going to try and work with our partners to go and give much more advice about this. So if you go to, you were asking for URLs earlier, so ukie.org.uk/sustainability, you can go and read the Green Games Guide there and go and begin thinking about it yourself. So we kind of think, and we're hoping that actually after all of this, that people are going to be really thinking about that footprint too, because, you know, we love in-person events. We organize a lot of them as well. We do a lot of trade missions too. But there's definitely a lot that can be done brilliantly over video and things like this. So yeah, something that's front of mind for us.
Cool. Awesome. Renee?
We actually have really similar efforts. So the IGDA has many communities that we support, both local communities and special interest groups. And our special interest groups are advocacy, discipline, and affinity based. So game writers, game designers, women in games, Black in games. And one of our newest special interest groups is actually our climate special interest group, which is being led by a couple of extremely passionate developers about reducing the climate impact of video games in the game industry. So they've been meeting on a weekly basis and putting forth wonderful guidelines about reducing your carbon footprint, best steps to take. And they are also forming a collective of game studios that are coming together to take these steps together. So if you're interested in that, really cool. IGDA.org.
Yes, I am. I'll check that out.
Yeah, the climate SIG.
Yeah, fantastic. I think that's really, really good. You know, we've been thinking about, hey, we're in a plane every month. Like, what are we gonna do about it? And you can offset it, but that's not the only thing you can do, right? Kirstin, part of your mission for the future as well?
Yeah, to a lesser degree. I haven't gone and published a guide on or anything like that. But again, I do try to drive home that digital conferences save a lot of time, money, and resources, and that they should be something that you don't leave behind the second you can, never to look back. On a personal level, the last conferences I visited last year, which was in January, Pocket Gamer and White Nights, I actually did that by train. So I did Munich, London, Amsterdam, Munich, and that went really well. It was actually nice because you can work a lot better on a train than on a plane. So yeah, more of that, less traveling, less long haul flights.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. We have a question, very interesting. Is there any way you publish my game with your budget? I think we're not the right people to do that, but thank you for the question. Yes, so I'm wondering the fact that Paladin is in existence for about 15 years, and last year in April we actually hired our first people and culture managers, and I don't think we would have made it through the last 14 months or 12 months without her. Very happy about that, and I wonder if this is a trend that you guys see, or that we expect to see, that the focus on the people is going to be much different after this whole event, after this pandemic, than it has been before. I mean, Kirstin and Renee, you both hinted at it before, but do you think that people in culture, or HR, or what we want to call it, is going to have a very different focus on it for any company that starts up or reaches a certain size going forward, because of what we just went through?
Yes. If you want to go, really go.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that there is a big understanding that the health of your workers, contributes to the health of your studio and the health of your game. And I think that is progress that we were going down the route of anyway, but the pandemic made that so much more noticeable, because, we saw that, workers being in a good mental health state, workers having support, workers not being distracted leads to productivity. And when that is lost, games are delayed, things come out without the same quality that is expected, and there are other various issues. It's actually funny that you mentioned culture specifically, because next month we're publishing game development, culture, diversity, and team development as a 10-page currently guide that's really, really straightforward and stripped down, in partnership with Facebook Gaming, to assist studios, particularly newer studios, in establishing a proactive, healthy, positive culture. So look for that. I don't have a link there yet for you, but it's certainly going to be in our resource library. We're just actually going through the final draft with all of our wonderful special interest groups to make sure that we're considering all of the disciplines and all of the different affinity groups in its creation.
Cool, fantastic. Yeah, the culture has been a heavy focus in our studio for a long time, so I think we had a bit of an advantage there going into this last year. But I'm seeing a lot more focus myself there on fellow people and companies in the industry too. George, similar observations there?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was going to go for a sort of a slightly sort of more personal observation on it, I guess, because I think a year like this makes you think a lot about what you actually want to do with your life, because you're forced to put it on pause. And while it's on pause in so many different ways, work was kind of all we had. So, I found, I mean, working at Ukie, I've got to be honest, it's been a brilliant environment for it. We have people regularly checking in on us. It seems to be like roughly about every 3 weeks, something turns up at my door, like a box of fruit or chocolate or a campfire kit. And we have a virtual campfire. There's all of these kinds of little things that just make you feel that people are looking out for you. And, when you're thinking about what's your life going to be like when hopefully things are resuming or getting into that new normal, I think people will remember that. They will remember whether or not the organization they were in supported them or not. And they will think, I'm looking for a place that's going to do that. So, I know that with some companies, they might not see that as a good thing, but I see it as an opportunity. If you can be the one who goes and builds that inclusive working culture that makes people feel valued, and you can do it from the ground up, it doesn't matter if you're a small team, you can start there and, ingrain those things like regular social breaks so that you can have good conversations, little perks for the team and all of that, then you're going to build yourself a really good foundation for the future. Because, that's one of the things that I've actually not necessarily enjoyed from the pandemic, probably the wrong word, but appreciated, has been the humanity of it. You've seen people's work calls, someone in the middle of a serious presentation get Zoom bombed by their cat. You've seen children running in the background, running amok, and someone grabs them up and just has and you're just chatting with their kid.
Best.
It's the best. And it's one of those things that, we get so much of a sense of human interaction from when we're face to face together. But I think we've got an insight into the people we work with and the world they have. And I think now that you've had that kind of insight, you don't want to lose it. So Is that perhaps a little bit pretentious? But that's what I'm going to go for.
Absolutely not. I think that's yeah. You're hitting a really good note there, and I'm seeing similar things. Kirstin, did you have something?
I do. Okay. I think it's super necessary, and it's a function of the situation, but it will be required in the after as well, because we're clearly not going back to like full presence office. I think virtually no company, even outside of games, is going to do that, because people will want to keep some home office days, and you're going to have to find ways to still build a sense of community, right, and like maintain that. I mean, we're kind of, I can't really speak for myself, but it's like sort of working, and has been sort of working for the past year. But once a lot of restrictions are lifted and people are still in home office, you will have to have concerted efforts for people meeting up, certain groups being in the office together every now and then. And I don't see that happening without some HR and culture management. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. I saw some research actually. A survey that said that 25% of all the people they ask, hey, if your employer makes it mandatory for you to go back to the office, they said, well, I'm going to quit. Yeah. That's astonishing. It's really interesting. I think, the lasting impacts of this were most of it we're just going to figure out over time. But I think there's going to be a lot of positive things we'll take out of it. So we're at 45 minutes, and we can just keep going. But I think eventually Sophia is going to let us say hello. How dare she is?
Well, I mean, I did take your cue, to be fair. I was happy for you guys to go on for a little bit longer. But no, I'd like to say, it was a really, really lovely panel. And I think it's something that's on a lot of people's minds right now. It's certainly on my mind right now, as in, when we'll get back to being able to see each other in person and everything else like that. So I think it was a really good topic to go through. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here and being a part of the show.
Hey, thank you, Sophia. Really, really appreciate you guys providing us this forum. One idea I just had, because I'm seeing an animal there running around through our panel, which is awesome.
I do have one here, yes.
I should have brought my puppies. Is Pocket Gamer allow puppies or animals on their next physical location event? Because that would be awesome.
It's a good question, that one. I don't have the answer to, but yeah, I'm sure. Well, Chris has a new dog, so I'm sure it might be on his mind as well.
There we go, a puppy pen. I would totally pay for that. Here's a monetization idea for you guys. Renee, Kirstin, George, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to chat to you guys. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
And thank you,
you guys
for
around
running that as well. Thank you. And I will see you tomorrow.
You see me tomorrow, and I'll be back on this channel on Wednesday, I think.
Fantastic.
Bye.
Bye.